Perfect. Hey, Ben. Welcome to the podcast of Let's Figure It Out. This is the podcast where we try to explore different stories, such as yours, which can help us to find more insights and help us to guide different individuals in their career to find sort of like the next best thing in their professional journey. First of all, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeet, I'm a fan of your work. I'm a fan of the podcast, and I'm very excited to be here today.
Glad to hear that, Ben. So, uh, would love to start by knowing a little bit more about your background and your journey. So, would you tell our listeners about how did you started your professional journey and how did you land up at Salesforce in this particular role today?
Yeah, definitely. So I attended University at North Carolina, where I was a business major, and I was a Chinese minor, which is always interesting to people, catches them off guard. A little fun fact. And after college, I, like most of my peers, was applying for a lot of jobs. And it was kind of maybe like the tail end of the 2008 recession. It was a few years after, but I felt like hiring was still kind of slow. And I applied for about 100 jobs, interviewed for about 25, had a bunch of second rounds, and then got one job offer. So that's the job that I took. One job is better than no job. And then I moved to Atlanta, where I reside today. And looking back, so thankful, for where I ended up. Looking back on our journey, it all fell into place for a reason. And some other important advice that's important to my story, or an important tidbit, is some advice that I got when I was flying down for the job that I got. I ended up getting. And the person next to me saw that I was, a younger guy in a suit, and struck up a conversation. Turns out he was a pastor. And I was like, oh, like that's someone different. I've gotten a lot of advice from friends and my girlfriend and, family and career advisors and teachers. I was like, what do you think? What random advice would you give a stranger? And the advice that he gave me has stuck with me. He said, Ben, find a job that makes the world a better place. And that has stuck with me. And I've made a few jumps in my career. And it's been for some personal or career development decisions, but it's also been because I wholeheartily believe that I'm making the world a better place in making this jump. So I started off doing revenue cycle consulting for hospitals, and just kind of I felt like they kept losing the same money over again due to like technology issues. I was like, oh, let me go get closer to the technology. And then I went to Athena Health, which is an EHR company. I was like, this is going to be great. This is what we need, better technology. And then towards the end, I remember having this moment where I was like, and it's a little bit of a cliche, but like, doctors are type. They're never looking at you, Jeet. Look at me. Like I'm a person, figure out who I am. And I was like, I think that healthcare needs something to deliver service. That's what it needs. Healthcare needs customer service. And so I started doing some research around one of my buddies that I'd started my career with was now at Salesforce. He brought me over, and I have not looked back. It's been an incredible ride, 7 years, but ultimately I believe that here at Salesforce, I am making the world a little bit better of a place.
Wow, that's an incredible story that you started with around the recession time, and then you found that one job which gave you direction to one thing to other, and now you are sort of like working alongside with some amazing minds in healthcare industry, and you are trying to solve those problems. You are actually helping the world makes a better place to live, and making the world a healthy place to live. So that's amazing. So uh, another question, which since you have this different experiences, what are some key skills and lessons each different roles have taught you, or probably like one lesson which you have learned so far in your professional journey?
Yeah. I think a couple, maybe I'll try to keep it short. A couple of key lessons were I think the first lesson that I learned was like, make your boss's life easier. Like I remember my first job, I would go to my boss and be like, oh, like, what do you want me to do? How should I do it? And then I had a realization, like, they're not paid to babysit me. They're paying me because presumably I know what to do. And so that was a good lesson learned, something I've carried through to this day. Make your jobs, make your boss's life a little bit easier. And then I think really the importance of data and being able to measure it, that is so helpful, because data and analytics and insights, they tell stories, and that's ultimately what people love. People love stories. So when I was working with a doctor, working with a healthcare administrator, trying to help, administrator, the data, like they would fall in love with my story, learn to tell a good story, but then they needed data to back it up. And if I was able to give both, that would go a long way. And then I think also something that I've been learning recently is like keep trying to solve bigger problems. Like keep thinking big, keep the energy, keep the excitement. And those are kind of some things that I've learned throughout my career, kind of at each different role that I've.
Awesome. So connecting back to what you just said, like solving bigger problems. So I think for the next 20 minutes, I want to spend time on how you started solving those two big problems. The first one is to how you are educating individuals on the finance journey. And then we can dive more into your Airfare Butler business. So first thing, Ben, how did this all started? What was that aha moment for you that you wanted to start something of your own, and how did you started that journey with Young Money Finance?
Yeah. So I feel like I've been an entrepreneur since like first grade. It is just like in me. Like I was the kid like selling pencils or like little skateboards or toys. I was just always hustling, always thinking of ideas. It's just kind of how my mind works. It's just always, I feel like I've always had an idea or two floating around in my head. Um, and I think so. I'm always trying things. Like I heard someone give advice that was like, look, being an entrepreneur is just like throwing a bunch of stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. Um, and so that was something that, I kind of took to heart, was thinking. So I've had a number of, different ideas all throughout my time, but some of we'll get into some of my, I guess, more successful ones. And then, so the Young Money Finance blog, I moved to Atlanta and had my girlfriend, then fiance at the time. She was living back in North Carolina. So I had time on my hands because, I didn't want to like go out, too much, and like was, talking to her on the phone a lot and just, slowly making friends. And I've always like enjoyed writing, and I've always enjoyed personal finance. And I was like, maybe other people want to listen to what I have to say. And that was my hypothesis. I think as an entrepreneur, you're always like testing a hypothesis. And so I just started writing, and I was writing 2 articles a week. It slowed down since then. But kind of my idea was taking financial advice and giving it to young professionals. So hence Young Money Finance. And because there was a lot of good content out there. Now the personal finance blogosphere is very crowded. I'm a small to medium player in there. But yeah, my whole vision was like, hey, like I want to make it actionable and digestible so that like people can actually do stuff with it.
Got it. And that's a great way to sort of like club your two sort of like interests together. So you had interest with writing, and the topic was pretty much closer to your other interest as well, which is finance. So what was sort of like, how did you try to engage this audience? Because I know young audiences kind of like their mind is everywhere. So they'll read one thing over here, the one thing over there. But what made you create that sort of like engaging content?
Mm-hmm. I think readers and I think when you're starting a blog or starting it, you're gonna like cast your net far and wide, and like you got to have some clickbaity type articles and
Yeah.
headlines and quick hits. That's how we like to consume content. For example, for the longest time, I was number one on Google for how or the hidden costs of driving for Uber and Lyft.
Wow.
Got really lucky there, so I was one of the top. So got a lot of clicks that way. But then I think I thought about cultivating, really building my brand and having readers return. So I think I have a lot of good return readers because they value what I have to say. And, I try to stick to, I call them like the cardinal rules of personal finance, income equals, expenses plus saving, and then just living within your means and focusing on progress. And I think that a lot of my blog articles, all center around that. And so I think creating a brand that people can resonate with. And so, it's not for everybody, but, it's definitely for some people.
Absolutely. And I personally love reading about like personal finance because I still feel like that's one of the topic each and every student should learn in their school times, and that should be part of a school curriculum, because that's so important in the whole life, that how if you manage your personal finance, you can manage a lot of different things. And if you're pretty confident there, you'll have a very stable life down the road. Ben, I would love to ask you in that way. Again, for all the listeners, this is not a recommendation of something that Ben is recommending, a stock or something. But the next question I'm about to ask is more like habits. So, like, Ben, if you can share like 2 to 3, or sort of like a process of like managing finance, every professional should be doing, like 2 to 3 habits, if you can share with the listeners.
Uh, so the first one that I always recommend is create a budget. I always say if you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there. If you don't make a plan, you'll never get there. Too many people that I know like just don't have a budget. And I'm very type A, I love being organized. Like it just stresses me out not having a budget. But I think very simply put, a budget is just a way to track your money and better understand, how much is coming in, how much is going out. And then from there, you can set goals. And if you set goals, you can work towards your goals. Otherwise, it's going to be like you're in this never ending cycle. And I think, so that's the first thing I always tell people, like get a budget. There's lots of different budgeting tools out there, ranging from the high tech to the low tech. And I always say, like, find one that works for you. Like I use a spreadsheet because I'm old school and I like putting it in manually. Other people like just connect it to your phone or whatnot, and just connect it to your banks and your credit cards, and you'll get good information that way. And if you can measure it, then you can manage it. Um, the second thing that I always like to say is automate. I don't know about you, Jeep, but like I'm a sucker for, a DoorDash delivery. I'm a sucker for like, going, getting something at the grocery store in the checkout line or whatnot. And so for me, at the end of the month, it's kind of like, oh crap, like I got to save. Like I forgot to save. I forgot to invest. Let me move whatever money I have. And so for me, automating it, just make it easy, straightforward. And a lot of times if you automate it, like at Salesforce, I have a lot of, do 401k, do our stock purchase program, and it's automated. So it's out of sight, it's out of mind. I don't have to worry about it, and it's just growing. And so sometimes when I stress about money, I'm like, hey, I'm saving a lot of money. I just don't see it, but I know it's there. So automating. And then the third one is like, keep it simple and like, don't pay attention to the noise. Like
Yes.
I'm a big, and I know you said, like no stock recommendations, but like I'm a big index fund guy. Keep it simple. And yeah, like 99% of my investments are in an index fund. I still like a little bit because I like to play, but like, man, I remember like getting caught up in the news cycles and the doom scrolling, and like, one day the economy is going up, one day it's going down. Oh my gosh, like turn it off. Don't worry. Index funds. Yeah. So those are like my top 2 to 3 things I would, tell your listeners and my readers. So
Absolutely. I can't agree more, because I do the same thing when it comes to like investing. It's more like, if I'm not the master of the investment side of the business, like how a company's balance sheet looks like, how their quarter was, if I'm not able to paying attention on those 500 companies, there is a person who is doing that for me. And all I need to pay is like a little expense, sort of like fee for it. So be it be, but I will be stress free, and I can just put my money over there and just put it into 3 buckets. That's what I do. I put it in S&P, I put it in one of the NASDAQ, and then a particular ETF I have for dividends. So I just put my money in those 3 buckets and just forget about it. And I don't see it, I don't watch it. Things will go up and down the road. After 10 years, I'm pretty sure it will be up, because if compounding will definitely give you profit rather than loss. So that's one motto which I learned before 3 years, and I think 3.5 years. And I'm just keeping a habit of like just doing the same thing again and again. It's boring, honestly, but it's working. So I'm happy with it.
that's awesome. Good for you.
Absolutely. Uh, Before we dive into Airfare Butler, one other question. Does any ever it comes to your mind about, like, we were talking about index funds, but cryptocurrency is kind of huge since last 6 7 years. Uh, What are your thoughts on crypto? I'm not asking in terms of like investment perspective, but in terms of like, have you seen listeners or like your bloggers coming to you asking feedback on something? Hey, how does the market is working and compared to the regular stocks?
Yeah. I so disclosure, I do own some crypto, just a very small, very very small portion. Because I think for me, kind of as you said, like things get boring sometimes, and I find if I got to scratch the itch a little bit, and so I'll dabble a little bit, just a little bit though. But I think yeah, with with readers, and it's funny. I've been blogging for about 11 years. And
Wow.
so I actually have an article from about 8 or 9 years ago when Bitcoin was $250.
Whew.
And I was like, don't,
Wow.
and I basically laid out, I was like, hey, here's why I'm not investing in Bitcoin. And looking back, like I'm dying on the inside. But at the time, I made the right decision with the information that I had at hand. And I think
Absolutely.
that's important. That's a good way to live your life. I made the right decision then. It was a little bit different of a world back then and, different circumstances. And I think, my advice kind of remains the same. Like it's very risky. I've gotten scammed. Or not scammed, like had a company go bankrupt that I was invested in with some crypto. I've lost a bunch of money. I've made some money too. Like it's unpredictable. So for me, I go back to the index funds. Keep it simple, ignore the noise. And if you want to scratch the itch a little bit, I do have some. Sometimes I like to, orange pill, I think is the expression, and go down some rabbit holes and, think about that. But yeah, so on the whole, like I said, 98, 99% of my money is in index funds in the stock market. So keep it simple. But I love
Keep
talking
it
about
simple.
crypto and thinking about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just like you just mentioned about like if you ever feel bored, the thing I've started doing is like I go to Perplexity or ChatGPT, just play around asking those hypothetical questions. And I mean, I know at the end of the day, I'm not going to spend my money on crypto for now, but I just ask a hypothetical question just to play around and see how it looks like or how what it says. And sometimes the answers are very interesting. So, but I agree to your point. I try to keep it simple as well. Index ones is way to go for me as well. Perfect. So, but for our listeners, if anyone wants to subscribe for any upcoming newsletters, Young Money Finance is the blog which Ben writes, and we'll definitely share more details in our video as well. Do check it out. All right. So, Ben, let's move on to the next venture because you are one of the entrepreneur where you are playing like multiple different roles. You are a professional solution, distinguished solution engineer at Salesforce, as well as you have two of this different business. So, tell us more about Airfare Butler.
Yeah. Well, I do think it's worth mentioning. So if I'm your listener, they're probably thinking like, who's this Ben guy? Like, why is he working corporate and having all these side hustles? A framework that I adopted a few years ago that's really benefited me in my, my entrepreneurial endeavors, but also in my corporate life as well, is kind of the idea of like putting my endeavors into three different categories. So I have sustain, I have grow, and I have moonshot. And I kind of like to think, sustain, I'm going to spend 60, 70% of my time. Grow, I'm going to spend 20, 30% of my time. And then moonshot, it's scratching the itch a little bit, right? Getting into it. So for me, and focus is another big word of mine that I like to think about. Like I said, I used to have ideas floating around all in my head, and really, I think I found a lot more success once I started to focus and once I started putting them in these categories. And so, I will say for me right now, Young Money Finance is very much in a sustain mode. And it's kind of like, you hate to admit it to yourself a little bit, but like just come into terms with like, hey, I'm not going to be a Mr. Money mustache. I'm not going to be the greatest blogger out there, but like I'm really happy with where I'm at. Like I've got a small readership. I enjoy writing and putting content out. So like I'm good with that. And I make beer and pizza money, I call it, or someone called it. So I make a little bit to kind of help out, which is nice. So and then for Airfare Butler, so about I think it was yeah. So I've been doing it. This is like year two. So last year it was very much in the moonshot. Like allowed myself some thinking time to play around, but it started going well, and so I've actually moved my moonshot down to my grow category. So now I'm spending a lot of time and energy thinking about growing. So I think hopefully that's some helpful context into like how I try not to have too many ideas. I try to focus on a few things, and also, keep the corporate salary rolling into and spending a lot of time and effort there too.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put your ideas because I mean, every human being have some or the other kind of ideas coming to their brain in terms of like, hey, I want to do this or I want to do that along with my corporate career, or I want to do this side business. But taking action and then putting them, just like how you have segmented out into three different buckets, it's a great way or like a framework to follow so that you can be accountable and you can focus on those areas if you are really interested to work on it. So, first question I want to ask for the Airfare Butler is, how did this idea came to your mind? What was the whole reason behind it, and how did you started it?
Yeah. So the idea, well, I'm a personal finance guy. I love being frugal and not overpaying, but I also love traveling. And so always talking traveling with my buddies. And one of my buddies said, we're talking and he's like, hey, I just booked a flight to London. And I was like, hey, good for you. That's awesome. And then fast forward like 2 weeks, he calls me up. He's like, Ben, you're never going to believe this. My price dropped. And I was like, okay, like that makes sense, prices rise and fall. And he's like, dude, I called the airline and they gave me a flight credit back. And my mind was blown. I was like, how the heck did I never think of this? Like, I've been throwing away money and wasting it. And I was like, no way this happens, dude. Like, that was a fluke. So I started off, I had about, I think like 20 flights or so that I like just randomly picked, a couple different airlines, a couple different, national, domestic, far out, close by. And I was like, let me see if he's onto something. And to my surprise, 40% of those flights fell in price while I started watching them. And I was like, what the heck? Like, what is this? And so I started looking around at, like Hopper, Google Flights. And what I found was like, those services are really focused on the predictive side of that. It's like, gee, you want to go somewhere out west? Like, they've got so much data and they'll kind of give you some insight into when you should book your flight. But what I found the gap was, I was like, there's not really a service that like tracks your flight after you book it. And it's kind of like a different mindset. Like people, oftentimes, like myself included, I would stress, watch the flight, and then I'd book it and then I'd forget about it. And so with Airfare Butler, trying to shift that a little bit and be like, hey, like your flight could change. And post COVID, there's no change fees. On basic, it gets a little gray area, but you can still do it with basic. And it works. And so I just started testing it. I started rolling it out kind of, and I've been dealing with kind of manually doing it versus more using technology, which has been a fun experiment and learning experience for me. But that's a little bit about the origin story, just like hitting me in the face being like, how have I not thought to do this before?
Wow, that's really cool, and I agree because every time we book the flight, it's more like one task is done. Now let's focus on the places we need to visit, and we just forget about the flight, and we never check the site, or if it's dropping or not. But I would like to share a story from mine with the Airfare Butler. Is we recently traveled to Portland, and I booked my wife's ticket and then put it in their Airfare Butler. And the best part of using Airfare Butler was like the service you provide is like so personalized. So I got my first email. It's not something automated, but it's more like a person is sending, like Ben is typing and Ben is sending to me, which is feel more personalized and connected. And then I also got another email that, hey, you booked the best price, so you have the best price, so we didn't get chance to sort of like match it for any other price. But still, I got another email confirming that, hey, you had the best price and wish you a very happy journey and so on and so forth. So it's more personalized connection which I experience, which is great to find in these days where ChatGPT is in place. So thank you and kudos to you on that. So tell me more about Airfare Butler. Like, how can our listeners can get in touch with it, and how the whole model works?
Yeah. And I mean, first of all, thank you for the kudos. And I hope you got your second email as you were sitting in your airplane. I purposely did it because, like, I noticed
Yes.
one time, and next time you fly, right before you take off, look around. Everyone's on their phone. And so I was like, oh, I'm going
Yes.
to schedule my email right before you take off. And it's like a feel good. Yeah. It's either like, hey, congrats, we saved you a bunch of money, or congrats, you booked the lowest price. Yeah, well, thanks for that. Those kudos there. Glad
Absolutely.
you liked it. But yeah, so how it works, it's like I said, it's a little bit different of a model. So like, do all your research. Like I tell people to go to Google Flights. Like they're pretty good at what they do. Do all your research, do all your planning, do all your watching, do all your predicting, and then once you book, send it to me. Like and then it's out of sight, out of mind for you. I like to say you have a butler by your side. Your butler's got you. So what I do is then I monitor it daily and just track it. And I've tried to get fancy, like, oh, like, when will it fall? I try to predict it myself. There is like no rhyme or reason. I've seen flights fall on a Monday, on a Tuesday, every day of the week. I saw a flight one time fall 3 days before departure. It works with miles too. It's really, there's no right. It's all like supply and demand, and that's really hard to predict. And so just, hey, have a butler, have me watch it. And what I do is, like I said, I like to minimize, like, there's no app, there's nothing to download. All you do is you shoot me an email with your flight itinerary, and then I got you. And then I'll either reach out if it drops or to let you know you booked at the best price. And if it drops, that's when it gets fun. So, like I said, I'm up to about 350 flights that I've tracked. 40% of them have fallen. Like that number has remained consistent. So I like to tell people I have a 40% chance of saving you $100 because that's what we see on average. And I'll track it. And so, Jeet, if your price falls, I'll shoot you an email. I think I want to get maybe closer to like me rebooking for you, but I don't know how people will feel about that. Like, trying to get to know people a little bit more and figure it out. But for right now, and then with Delta, you can rebook through your app. You can do it on your phone, and you don't have to talk to anyone. With American United, you do have to call, but it's like a
Hold
15
on.
minute flight. So all you say is hey, I noticed my flight fell in price. Would you mind rebooking me? And they'll rebook you, same seats, same, departure, same flight exactly. And then you'll just have a flight credit in your wallet.
That's so amazing, and everyone loves to have that money saved. I mean, even if it's $1 or $10, hey, you save something, right? So, and definitely once you start using it, and once you see this working, people will get like the frequent travelers will get back to you and like, hey, we're traveling again. Help us find another best price. I think last time we spoke, you mentioned that you have saved almost $12,000 overall for the customers. Any particular fun story you want to share, like the biggest drop you have saved,
Yeah.
or any story you can share?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll share a personal story because I'm a
Sure.
customer too. So we went to the Dominican Republic over spring break a few months ago, and our flight dropped like I think it was like $300, and so I got that back. And then my aha moment, I was like, I get to go visit my grandma for Christmas. Like I'm going to use this money to go visit my grandma and see her at Christmas. I was like, that's so amazing. So that was really a feel good, just like it's like surprise money, like you said. Everyone loves finding money. Some particular cool stories, though. The most I've saved someone is $1,000. She's going to
Wow.
Greece. $1,000. And so it actually fell a few times, and she rebooked more than once, which it works too. So that's like really cool. $1,000 back in her pocket. And then another cool story is, I get people sometimes and they're like, oh, I'll just do it myself, or I like to track my own flights. I saved a customer $178. They were going to Germany, and their flight fell one day. For one day, it fell. I caught it, notified them. They rebooked. The next day, it was back up.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Awesome. That's so amazing. And that story of like $1,000, that's almost like another ticket for another person if they're traveling international, like from Asia to North America, you almost spend a similar amount. So that's really great. I'm definitely going to put your website in this video in the description so more people can leverage it and probably they can save more money. Ben, this is amazing. Just wanted to ask one last question before we wrap up here. So, juggling between multiple different sort of uh, like your professional work, your different businesses, what's one piece of advice you would like to give to someone who is thinking in a similar direction, like starting like a side hustle?
Yeah. I think two pieces of advice, if I may, Jeet. So the first
I
piece of
love
advice
that.
is like And for me, this was an aha moment. It was kind of like, think about why you want to be an entrepreneur. And like, is it freedom? Is it creativity? Is it, more money? Like, what are you looking for? And I say that because about 2 years ago at Salesforce, I kind of had a similar experience. I was like, why do I keep trying these ideas and these things? And someone challenged me. They were like, Ben, you can be an entrepreneur at Salesforce. Like, we're a really creative space here. And I started doing that. Like, I came up with events and ideas and new sales programs, and I leaned in on my creative muscle. And that is when my career started to accelerate. So it was really cool to be like, hey, like, bring your talent. Like, just if you're an entrepreneur, like, you don't have to start your own business to do that. Like, you can do that in corporate America.
Yeah.
So it's my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice is choose something that you're really excited and passionate about. Like you love podcasting. This is your little side hustle. Like, it's a lot of work, I'm sure. Like, there's a lot of pre-planning, post-planning, editing. Same thing with Airfare Butler. Like, I'm always telling people about it. I'm, working on tracking the flights and the emails. The analogy that I heard was eating the seal. And I heard this on a podcast, not yours, Cheat, sorry. But it was the idea of like this journey to Antarctica, an expedition, and they got stuck for 2 years and they had plenty of food to eat, but it was just seals. And so they had to eat a seal every day. And the analogy was like, that's what being an entrepreneur is like. You got to eat the seal every day. And
Every
like, there's
day.
days you're going to have good days and bad days. And like, so make sure that you're passionate about it. Like, Jeet, you love podcasting. I love, traveling and saving money. So that'll help you get through the not so good days as you just eat the seal every day. So
No, that's an amazing piece of advice, and I completely agree that when you're starting something of your own, you definitely have to go through a lot of different things, whether it's planning, whether it's like the actions you take, or whether you want to grow in that direction. It takes a lot, and outside world can see that this is a piece of cake, but it's more the person who is into that journey will experience it. But one thing, that journey is beautiful because you love and you learn things on a daily basis. Uh, but Ben, this was amazing. Thank you so much for having this conversation. We learned so much from your overall professional journey, whether it's like having a professional career alongside with two different, like a blog business, as well as connecting to blog Airfare Butler business, which is great. So definitely you made that point for that from that pastor. You are doing some amazing work for this world to make this world a better place. So thank you again for doing that. And thank you for being on this podcast.
awesome. Thank you so much, Jeet. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise. Thank you so much.